Why is Bigfoot restricted from coming in contact with us, sitting down at a campfire, and mind speaking with all of us? Research on missing people.
You're deep in the mountains of Northern California. The sun disappeared behind the tree line 20 minutes ago. Your campfire crackles, throwing dancing shadows against the towering pines. Then you hear it. A sound that doesn't belong to any animal you know. Not a bear, not a mountain lion. Something else. Footsteps, heavy, deliberate, circling your camp. You grab your flashlight with trembling hands and shine it into the darkness. For just a split second, you see them two eyes, reflecting your light like mirrors, at least 8 feet off the ground. Then silence. Whatever was out there is now standing completely still. Watching you. This isn't fiction. This is the reality that hundreds, no, thousands of people have experienced in North America's wilderness. And according to former law enforcement officer and investigator David, what these people encountered isn't just some undiscovered ape, it's something far more disturbing. Today, I'm going to show you evidence that will change everything you thought you knew about Bigfoot. Evidence that's been systematically ignored, buried, and dismissed by mainstream science for decades. But before we dive into the truth that authorities don't want you to know, make sure you hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications, because this channel brings you the mysteries and evidence that others are afraid to cover. Let's begin. He's a former police officer, a trained investigator with over 20 years of law enforcement experience, including work in the SWAT team and as a detective. He's someone who built his career on evidence, facts, and following where the truth leads, no matter how uncomfortable. In the late 1990s, something happened that would change the trajectory of his entire life. While working on a research project in a remote area, David was approached by 2 off-duty park rangers. What they told him seemed impossible at first. They described multiple incidents within national parks, strange disappearances, unusual reports, and encounters with something that official records refused to acknowledge. These rangers trusted David because he was law enforcement. They knew he would treat the information seriously, and he did. What started as curiosity became an obsession. David began investigating the phenomenon we call Bigfoot with the same rigorous methodology he used in criminal investigations. He didn't want stories, he wanted evidence, and what he found was terrifying. Over the past 2 decades, David has interviewed hundreds of witnesses, collected thousands of reports, analyzed footprint casts, examined hair samples, and documented patterns that science simply cannot explain away. His most famous work, the Missing 411 series, reveals disturbing connections between Bigfoot sightings and mysterious disappearances in national parks, but we'll get to that in a moment. First, let's talk about what Bigfoot actually is. Because according to David's evidence, calling it just an ape is dangerously misleading. Let's start with the most obvious evidence: footprints. Now I know what you're thinking. Footprints can be faked. People hoax this stuff all the time. You're absolutely right. Many footprints are hoaxes. But David points to specific cases that trained forensic experts have analyzed prints that display biomechanical features impossible to fake without advanced knowledge of primate anatomy and engineering. In 1967, researchers found a series of tracks in Bluff Creek, California. These weren't just big impressions in the dirt. When experts examined them, they found dermal ridges like fingerprints pressed into the sole. They found a mid-tarsal break, a flexible joint in the middle of the foot that humans don't have but apes do. They found dynamic pressure patterns showing natural weight distribution during walking, and depth variations consistent with a creature weighing 600 to 800 pounds. Dr. Jeff Meldrum, a professor of anatomy and anthropology at Idaho State University, has studied over 200 footprint casts. He stated on record that approximately 15% of these prints show anatomical features that would require extensive knowledge to fake features that weren't even known to science when the prints were discovered. Think about that. Someone would have to understand biomechanics that scientists hadn't discovered yet, just to create a hoax? But here's where it gets even stranger. David documents cases where footprints have been found in locations that are virtually inaccessible. We're talking about snowfields at 12,000-foot elevations where the snow is fresh and tracks appear overnight, swamps where prints are found miles from any road or trail, and ridgelines where the terrain is so dangerous that experienced climbers struggle to navigate. In one case from Alaska, a hunting guide found a trail of footprints that covered over 15 miles through terrain so rough that it would take a human with full gear at least 2 days to traverse. The prints were made in a single night. Whatever made those tracks move through that wilderness like it owned it? Footprints are one thing, but what about physical, biological evidence? This is where David's research gets truly fascinating and disturbing. Over the years, dozens of hair samples attributed to Bigfoot encounters have been collected and analyzed by laboratories. Most are identified as known animals: bear, deer, human contamination, but some remain unidentified. In 2003, Dr. Henner Fehrenbach, a biomedical research scientist, analyzed over 20 hair samples from alleged Bigfoot encounters. His findings? The hairs showed primate characteristics, but didn't match any known primate in North America. They had a unique structural pattern similar to human hair but significantly thicker, with a different medulla pattern. Then in 2012, the Oxford-Lausanne Collateral Hominid Project analyzed 36 hair samples from around the world. 2 samples from the Pacific Northwest showed DNA matches to an unknown primate species, something between a polar bear and an ancient bear species that supposedly went extinct 40,000 years ago. But here's what's truly unsettling. When researchers have tried to get funding for large-scale DNA studies on these samples, they've been repeatedly denied by mainstream scientific institutions. Why? David suggests it's because acknowledging Bigfoot's existence would create massive legal, environmental, and economic problems. Entire logging industries could be shut down. National parks would need to be closed. Hunting regulations would be upended. The government, David argues, has a vested interest in keeping this creature in the realm of myth. But if you're enjoying this deep dive into the evidence, do me a favor, hit that like button and subscribe so you don't miss future investigations. We're just getting started, and what comes next is even more shocking. Let me tell you about a pattern that David discovered, one that convinced him this phenomenon is absolutely real. When you interview witnesses separately, people who've never met each other, from different states and different decades, and they all describe the same specific details, that's evidence. David has cataloged thousands of eyewitness reports, and the consistency is remarkable. When it comes to physical appearance, witnesses consistently describe a creature standing 7 to 10 feet tall, with an estimated weight of 600 to 1,000 pounds. It has broad shoulders and almost no visible neck, with long arms that hang past the knees. It is covered entirely in dark brown, black, or reddish hair, with facial features that are ape-like but disturbingly human, and eyes that reflect light like an animal's, but carry an intelligence that is unmistakable. And the behavior patterns are just as consistent. Witnesses describe something that moves with incredible speed despite its size and can disappear into forest completely silently when it wants to. It communicates through wood-knocking sounds and vocalizations. It shows curiosity about humans but avoids direct contact, and it exhibits behavior suggesting high intelligence, problem-solving, and tool use. But it's the smell that really stands out. Almost every single witness mentions the same thing: a horrific, overwhelming stench, like rotting meat mixed with wet dog and something chemical. A smell so bad it makes people physically ill. One witness told David, "It wasn't like any animal smell I've ever encountered. It was wrong. Everything about it was wrong." Now, here's what's truly disturbing. David has documented dozens of cases where witnesses report that these creatures didn't just observe them, they felt like they were being hunted. Multiple people have described a sensation of being followed for miles through the forest, hearing parallel footsteps in the brush, seeing movement in their peripheral vision, feeling eyes on them constantly. And when they finally made it back to civilization, they discovered something chilling. There were massive footprints circling their tents, their vehicles, or the areas where they'd stopped to rest. Whatever these things are, they're not just avoiding humans, they're studying us. Now we come to the part of David's research that most people don't know about, the part that suggests Bigfoot might be far more dangerous than we've been led to believe. David's Missing 411 series documents thousands of mysterious disappearances in national parks and wilderness areas across North America. These aren't typical lost hiker cases. These are disappearances with bizarre characteristics. People vanishing in areas that have been thoroughly searched multiple times. Bodies found in locations that search teams had already covered extensively. Missing persons found miles away from where they disappeared, in terrain they couldn't have possibly traversed. Children found alive after weeks in the wilderness with no memory of how they survived. And clusters of disappearances in specific geographic areas, the same areas with high Bigfoot activity. One case stands out particularly. In 2013, a 4-year-old boy went missing in a heavily wooded area of Kentucky. Hundreds of searchers, dogs, helicopters, nothing. After 3 days in near-freezing temperatures, he was found alive 12 miles from where he disappeared, across a major river and through terrain that would challenge experienced adults. When asked what happened, the boy said, "The big man carried me." Search and rescue was baffled. There were no adult humans in that area. But David noticed something. That exact region had multiple Bigfoot sightings reported over the previous decade. Coincidence? He documents case after case with similar patterns. People disappearing near water sources, disappearances during berry picking season, bodies found with clothing missing or inside out, strange animal behavior before the disappearances. All of these are also common factors in Bigfoot encounter reports. David stops short of saying definitively that Bigfoot is responsible for these disappearances. He's too good of an investigator for that. But he asks the question that authorities refuse to address. If there's a large intelligent primate living in our national forests, shouldn't we be warning people about potential dangers? Shouldn't we be tracking it, studying it? The silence from park services and wildlife agencies is deafening. Here's where things get really controversial. David claims with supporting documentation that government agencies have actively suppressed evidence of Bigfoot's existence. Let's look at the facts. Fact 1. The FBI analyzed Bigfoot hair. In the 1970s, the FBI actually analyzed hair samples from alleged Bigfoot encounters. The results? They found hair that didn't match any known species in their database. These documents were classified for decades and only released through Freedom of Information Act requests in 2019. Why would the FBI analyze Bigfoot evidence if they thought it was just a myth? Fact 2. The Forest Service has internal protocols. Multiple former park rangers have come forward claiming that the National Park Service has specific protocols for handling primate sightings in certain parks. When incidents occur, they're documented in internal reports that are never released to the public. One ranger told David, "We were told to file the reports, but never talk about them, ever." Fact 3. Military encounters. David has collected numerous accounts from military personnel who encountered these creatures during training exercises in wilderness areas. In several cases, the encounters were so significant that entire training operations were canceled and moved to different locations. These soldiers were allegedly ordered to sign non-disclosure agreements about what they saw. Why the secrecy? David theorizes several possibilities. If Bigfoot is real, it would immediately be classified as critically endangered under the Endangered Species Act, which could shut down logging, mining, and development across millions of acres. Then there are the liability concerns. If the government admits these creatures exist and someone gets hurt or killed, the lawsuits would be catastrophic. There's also the fear of public panic. Admitting there's a 9-foot predator in our national parks might cause tourism to collapse entirely. And finally, scientific embarrassment. The scientific establishment has ridiculed Bigfoot for so long that admitting they were wrong would destroy credibility. Or maybe there's something even darker. Some researchers, including David in his more speculative moments, suggest these creatures might have capabilities we don't understand. Intelligence that rivals or exceeds our own. Abilities that don't fit into our current understanding of biology. What if the government knows something about Bigfoot that would fundamentally change how we see our place in the natural world? If this investigation is blowing your mind, make sure you're subscribed because we cover mysteries like this regularly. And hit that notification bell so you never miss an upload. Now let's talk about modern technology. You'd think that in the age of smartphones, trail cameras, and thermal imaging, we'd have definitive proof by now, right? Wrong. And that's actually part of what makes this so mysterious. David points to several fascinating cases involving thermal imaging. In 2012, a research group in Kentucky captured thermal footage of a bipedal figure moving through the forest at night. The figure stood approximately 8 feet tall and moved with a gait that biomechanical experts said was unlike any human or known animal. When they tried to track it, The creature seemed to deliberately avoid their cameras, moving through areas with the densest cover and stopping when it reached open areas. It was strategic. Trail camera evidence is even more puzzling. There are dozens of cases where trail cameras in known Bigfoot hotspots mysteriously malfunction. Cameras that work perfectly suddenly have corrupted memory cards. Batteries that should last months die overnight. Cameras repositioned or found destroyed. One hunter in Washington state set up 12 trail cameras in a grid pattern after finding massive footprints on his property. Within a week, 6 cameras were missing entirely. 4 had dead batteries, and 2 had been turned to face trees. The remaining camera captured a single frame, a blurry image of what appears to be a large, hair-covered hand reaching toward the lens. Skeptics say this proves nothing. Believers say it proves these creatures are far more intelligent than we give them credit for. David takes a middle position. The evidence suggests we're dealing with something that has learned to avoid our technology. Whether through intelligence or instinct, they've adapted to human monitoring methods. So after decades of investigation, after interviewing thousands of witnesses, after analyzing countless pieces of evidence, what does David believe Bigfoot really is? His conclusion might surprise you. David argues that Bigfoot is not a missing link in human evolution, not an alien creature, not a supernatural entity, and not a single species. Instead, he believes the evidence points to something more complex, an undiscovered species of great ape that has survived in North America for thousands of years. Highly intelligent, possibly as intelligent as early humans, with problem-solving abilities and social structures. Perfectly adapted evolution has made them ideally suited for forest environments, with strength, speed, and senses far superior to humans. Deliberately elusive, they've learned over generations that avoiding humans is crucial for survival. Existing in small populations, which explains why bodies are never found and sightings are relatively rare. And possibly multiple related species, different types adapted to different regions, from the Pacific Northwest to Appalachia to Alaska. But here's where David goes further than most researchers. He believes these creatures possess a level of intelligence that puts them somewhere between great apes and humans. They can plan, use tools, communicate complex ideas, and pass knowledge between generations. In his view, Bigfoot isn't just an animal. It's a wild hominin, a primate cousin that took a different evolutionary path than humans, one that chose the deep forest over civilization, strength over technology, survival through stealth rather than dominance. And according to David, their intelligence makes them potentially dangerous. Not because they're aggressive, most encounters suggest they avoid confrontation, but because an intelligent creature protecting its territory or young can be unpredictable. The missing 411 cases? David doesn't claim Bigfoot is responsible for all of them, but he suggests that in some cases, people may have gotten too close to nesting areas, food sources, or young, and what happened next? We can only speculate. Let me share 3 specific cases that David considers the most compelling encounters that, in his words, changed everything I thought I knew. Case 1. The Sierra Sounds, 1970, 1 to 1974. In the Sierra Nevada mountains, researchers recorded hours of vocalizations from unidentified creatures. These weren't just howls or grunts. Linguistic experts who analyzed the recordings identified complex vocal patterns, suggesting language, consistent phonemes, turn-taking, emotional inflection. The creatures were having conversations. One researcher who was there told David, "When you hear those sounds up close, you realize whatever made them is thinking, communicating. It's not just making noise." Case 2. The Marble Mountain Encounter, 2001. A group of experienced hunters in Northern California had an encounter that lasted over 20 minutes. A creature approximately 9 feet tall approached their camp at dusk, stopping about 50 yards away. It didn't charge, it didn't flee, it just watched them. One hunter described it to David. "It was looking at us the way we might look at an interesting animal in a zoo, curious, almost studying us. I could see intelligence in those eyes. And I'll be honest, I was terrified because I realized we weren't in control of that situation. It was." Case 3. The Alberta Thermal Footage, 2016. A research team captured thermal footage of what appears to be a Bigfoot running through a field at extraordinary speed. Frame-by-frame analysis showed an estimated height of 8 to 9 feet, a stride length of over 6 feet, an estimated speed of 35 to 40 miles per hour, and bipedal movement with an arm swing inconsistent with any known ape. What makes this case remarkable is what happened after. The team tried to return to the location, and their vehicle was blocked by tree limbs that had been deliberately placed across the road. Game cameras they'd set up were destroyed. Someone or something didn't want them coming back. These cases convinced David that we're not dealing with a dumb animal. We're dealing with something that has awareness, intention, and the ability to take countermeasures against human investigation. You might be wondering, why does this matter? So what if Bigfoot is real? David would tell you it matters for several crucial reasons. First, human safety. If large, potentially dangerous primates inhabit our wilderness areas, people have a right to know, and parents taking children camping deserve to understand potential risks. Second, scientific knowledge discovery of a North American great ape would revolutionize our understanding of evolution, primate behavior, and ecology. Third, conservation. If these creatures exist, they're likely critically endangered, and we might be losing a species before we even acknowledge it exists. Fourth, government transparency. If authorities are suppressing evidence, what else are they hiding? And public trust requires honesty. And fifth, indigenous knowledge. Native American tribes have spoken about these beings for thousands of years, and dismissing their accounts as myth is culturally disrespectful. But perhaps most importantly, it challenges our arrogance as a species. We like to think we've conquered nature, explored every corner, cataloged every species. Bigfoot's existence would prove that nature still holds mysteries, that we're not as dominant or all-knowing as we believe. There are still places where we are not the apex predator. There are still beings that watch us from the shadows, and maybe, just maybe, that's how it should be. So, what is Bigfoot? According to David's decades of investigation, it's an undiscovered primate species, or possibly multiple species, that has survived in North America's wilderness through exceptional intelligence, physical adaptation, and deliberate avoidance of human contact. It's not a monster, not a myth, not a hoax. It's a wild cousin of humanity that chose a different path. The evidence is there for anyone willing to look with an open mind. Footprints with anatomical features we can't explain, DNA that doesn't match known species, thousands of consistent eyewitness accounts, thermal footage, audio recordings, and documented patterns that mainstream science refuses to acknowledge. But perhaps the most compelling evidence is the simplest. For thousands of years, across dozens of cultures, people have reported encounters with large, hairy, bipedal creatures in the wilderness. From the Himalayan Yeti to the Australian Yowie to the North American Sasquatch, all of these cultures can't be wrong. All of these witnesses can't be lying. All of this evidence can't be fake. David has spent his life investigating this mystery with the rigor of a law enforcement officer and the curiosity of a truth seeker. His conclusion? We are not alone in the North American wilderness, and the beings sharing these forests with us are far more real and far more remarkable than we've been told. The question is no longer, does Bigfoot exist? The question is, what are we going to do with the evidence that it does? If this video changed how you see the Bigfoot mystery, make sure you subscribe to this channel for more deep investigations into mysteries that others won't touch. Like this video to help more people discover David's evidence. Turn on notifications so you never miss when we expose the truth. Comment below. Do you believe David's evidence? Have you had your own encounter? Share your story. Remember, the wilderness is vast. The mysteries are real, and some things are better left unseen. Or are they? Stay curious, stay vigilant, and I'll see you in the next investigation.